Hello, class. Welcome. We're now in Module 2 of the course. This module is dedicated to the cellular and molecular aspects of evolution. In other words, how variation is established. Okay. On the materials in this course, it would have delighted our friend Darwin because he was always looking for the source of variation, but could never find it simply because he was living in a period which did not have the technology to investigate it. We're going to be answering questions that he would have given his left ear to find out, just like old Van Gogh back here. He most likely would have. Um, and this is what we have discovered. Um, Deep within the architecture of each one of our cells is a tiny molecule. And we've encountered this in a presentation by Brian Cox back in What is Life. This tiny molecule called deoxyribonucleic acid. Our job to begin with is to unlock its secrets by understanding its architecture and how it goes about creating change, making change, right, in our genetic code. And then what are the cellular systems that take that change and propagate it through reproduction? That's our quest. Getting there, here's what we have in front of us. I've got a couple of PowerPoints that'll give you some background lecture on the molecular physiology, our internal cellular physiology, to let you know sort of how the system works, and really in a nutshell version. We're not going to go in very deep with it, but just enough to really understand how variation is established. I'll be doing that through PowerPoints with sound. And additionally, I have a very important short reading, and it should be below the first PowerPoint. I don't want you to skip this one. It's Sparks Notes. It's called Sparks 101. Sparks produces these little guides, these little, short synopsis guides. And they do a remarkably good job of just distilling the information that you really need to know to understand the subject matter without hyperbole and all the different runs down different rabbit holes. So I have that one there for you. Now, I also have a reading I want you to look at, and I mean look at, and that is chapter 5 out of the evolution text, the one written by Zimmer, the big book that you have. And here's the thing about that text, is that in chapter 5, the diagrams are fantastic. I mean, the illustrations they've done are great. The textual component is good too, but it takes you down the rabbit hole. It usually gives you far too much information, more than you need. What I want you to do is think about the stuff I've talked about in the PowerPoints. Let that be the sort of boundaries. So as you look through the Zimmerman text, don't go down the rabbit hole with them, down those long-winded explanations in too much detail. Stay with the visuals to watch it in motion, right? Get the visual thing working in your head, and that will lead to a much better understanding. All right. After we accomplish that, we're going to be looking at another subject, which is really important. And that's the consequences of our understanding of the cellular and molecular aspects. In other words, what humans tend to do is once they understand something, they generally seek to control it. And they seek to control it by many reasons. One, it's just that we can. And two, there's also financial rewards. There's a financial incentive in this. And so we are entering an entire sort of new wave of evolution. And here's what I mean. So let me give you a little bit of background. When Darwin was looking at evolution, he was looking particularly at just and exclusively at passive evolution. And that's normally what we call Darwinism. And this is what that is. You're an organism, you're in competition with other organisms. And if you get the right genetic changes and you can propagate them into your future generations, and those allow you to be more adaptable than other organisms for future generations, you win. If you don't, you lose and go extinct. And it can be, your adaptation to climate, rain, anything, climate to the changes in other organisms. And that's just passive. The world is working on you, and you're trying to get the correct changes to survive it. Well, we have another sort of mode of evolution that comes along, specifically in concurrence with humans' arrivals, right? Our ability to create culture, material things, right, around us, actually changes the selection pressures that are put upon us. They place new pressures and take away old pressures. Thus, we are changing genetically. We are being selected by the material things in which we make. In other words, it's still an unintended consequence of us trying to make a living. None of us are designing. I want to design this house so I can get the correct genetic changes. That's not our intended consequence. But now it's something different. Since the 1950s and the discovery of DNA and our knowledge about how these mechanisms work, we can change the DNA in itself. We can self-direct our evolution. And indeed, we are in a period of self-directed evolution, which implies considerable consequences and problems. The changes in which we make to our own cellular hardware, the DNA, are not temporary, they're permanent. They get propagated on to future generations, and they could have good consequences or deleterious consequences, not only for our own species, but for the planet. And one of the bigger issues is I think you can ask yourself this: have I ever had a say so in any of this? And you're sure your answer will probably be no, you haven't. And this can be very problematic. And the more that you learn about this, the more that you may want to have a voice in it. So we'll be learning a little about, what we do know about self-directed evolution. What are the problems, and maybe where we can have a voice. And that will end module 2 of this section. It's just dedicated to those themes. The exam for this, the quiz, is June 3rd. I want to put a reminder up that for you. So make sure you get all this stuff done before that time period. And also keep contacting me. So far, I've had so many students that have contacted me. I'm just like, this is great, and not just by email, but by voice. People are just calling me like, whoa, this is awesome. I get to speak with you. And it's really good, not just to touch base, to get to know each other, but really you have specific issues. And everybody, perceives information in a different way. God, I do. And sometimes I don't get what that person was saying, and somebody might. It's not your fault. It's just who we are. And so many of you are calling me saying, hey, I couldn't really understand that. I'm able to, bam, hone in on you and really help you at that point, or at least find other information sources for you so it becomes real crystal clear. And it's so important for you, and it's so important for me. I mean, I get actually nerve wracked. I'm like, oh my God, all my students are understanding this. And the more I contact with you, the more satisfied I am that I think so many of you are progressing. So please keep getting a hold of me. All right, bye.